Welcome to God Pods, faith conversations from Boston College's Church in the 21st Century Center.
Welcome. My name is Karen Kiefer, and I'm the director of the Church in the 21st Century Center. And we are a catalyst and a resource for the renewal of the Catholic Church. And one of the things that we do is produce a magazine. And we produce it twice a year. It's called C21 Resources. Many of you subscribe. It's free. We send it out to 180,000 people. And we just published our 32nd issue, and it's called Catholic Parishes, Grace at Work. Now, because we're in a pandemic, this magazine was supposed to come out in the spring, early spring actually. But then the pandemic hit, and we thought, how can we put out a magazine on Catholic parishes and not talk about the pandemic? So there's also a supplement that we had to do. And then we had to wait for the printing company to print the magazine. So instead of it being a spring issue, it's a summer issue. But we're so excited to celebrate this magazine in conversation today. I have the great gift of having Father Michael Simoni, who is actually an assistant professor in the School of Theology and Ministry. He teaches Old Testament and also preaching. And he, too, is the guest editor of the C21 Resources magazine of this particular issue. He's worked at works at St. Cecilia's Parish, also at St. Leonard's in the North End. And in his spare time, he does prison ministry. So he's just a remarkable man and a beautiful mind. I also had the great privilege of working with his colleague, Father Joe Weiss, who also teaches at the School of Theology and Ministry. And Father Joe teaches liturgy, but he has also served in parishes across the Midwest for 25 years. So he was wisdom as well when it came to kind of sourcing articles and piecing the magazine together. So Father Joe couldn't be with us today. He is recovering from surgery, and so he sent me some thoughts, and I'll share them with you and try to channel Father Joe. We also have two other panelists with us, Bob Manning. Bob is a retired special educator, and also most recently was the interim principal at St. John's School in Wellesley. He did that for a stint, God bless him. And then also he has been involved in his parish for 40 years and has come to a lot of C21 events and does so much for the church. He too is wisdom. So we're really excited to kind of engage him in his thoughts. And then last but not least, Jean Keegan. And Jean is also a graduate of the School of Theology and Ministry. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned that Bob has a master's degree from Boston College social work. And Jean graduated from the School of Theology and Ministry and has been working in parish ministry for the past 24 years. She is also the director of faith formation at Holy Family Parish in Duxbury. And she is known as a thought innovator. So we're excited to kind of pick her brain. But let's get started because we want to move this conversation right along. And when we put this magazine together, we wanted to make sure that we gave you articles that enlightened you, that challenged you, and that offered you ideas so that you could move your faith forward or move your parish forward. So anyway, when putting it together, that was our goal. And then, as I mentioned, I had the great grace of working with Father Michael and Father Joe. And we knew that, and know that the parish is our home. It's where we practice our faith. We also practice our faith at home, but the parish is so much a part of our Catholic life. And we wanted to share the power of the parish, and we wanted to look at it in very different ways, because we know the parish calls us home. The parish calls us to Jesus, calls us to the Eucharist. So Father Michael, let's start with you. In your lead piece in the magazine, both you and Joe wrote, no matter what changes, every parish can be a place of prayer, of proclamation, of service, and encounter with the living God still at work among us. Now, a lot has happened in, say, the last 30 years in parish life, and all of us know because we've seen the changes. But yet, this is the quote that stuck out to me. Do you want to elaborate?
I would. The important thing to emphasize, Joe and I both agreed, the idea that the traditional parishes that a lot of us grew up with, which were very homogenous and very plentiful, were not really the only model for parish ministry. So I'm not really. I'm born relatively recently, and I can still remember a parish that had a convent. I can still remember an elementary school that had, multiple sisters teaching in the classroom. There was a rectory that had 4 priests. There were four daily masses, and X number of weekend masses. CYO, a parish credit union. Like it was a hermetically sealed community center, basically. And the parish I worshiped, this was in Cleveland, Ohio, was just a dinky little neighborhood parish. And it had all of that. And all the other parishes around us had that too. And Joe said that was very much his own experience as well, that there was this model of parish life that had become very deeply entrenched in the American Catholic consciousness. And in many places, that's no longer the case. And so the parish I grew up in as a child still exists, thank God. So many of them don't. But none of those things are still functioning. And it's a completely different place today. And so what Joe and I really wanted to make sure we kept in our own mind, and that we presented to our readers, was this idea that there's something deeper to parish life than the stuff of parish life, which seemed so compelling and so universal, but was actually pretty superficial, right? Like, you can have a parish without an elementary school. I would not have believed that 30, 40 years ago. But like now I work in 2 parishes that do, and the kids have a different place of purchase in parish life and are just as active as we were, if not maybe even more so. There are different kinds of ministries that parishes can do in a very different world now that gather just as many people to the Lord as maybe the kind of neighborhood parish that I grew up in. The danger always is that we won't see that if we mourn what's lost or we mourn what's changed.
Mm-hmm.
But if we open our minds to the fact that, like, the world keeps moving, the worst thing we could do is stay still. And God is continuing to experiment with new ways of drawing people to the divine, to the Son. And as ministers of the Word, we have to be ready to figure out what God is doing and lend a hand. So that was really the thought and the prayer behind that last paragraph in our introductory essay.
Joe had reached out and just put some words together for his vision for the magazine. I just want to read quickly. He says, parish life has one requirement: faith in Jesus Christ that leads to baptism, which initiates us into the worshiping community that gathers and missions us for service to our neighbors in the world. The parish, with its strengths and weaknesses, its virtue and sin, is the tangible incarnation of the body of Christ. It is here that we come to celebrate life's joys and sorrows, to integrate life's transitions through our encounter with Christ and his sacraments: birth, death, repentance, reconciliation, communion and commitment, sickness and healing. So with that said, two quick notes. One is Patrick, my colleague Patrick, can you put the magazine link in the chat? Many of you that received the invite to this particular event, there was the link to the magazine, but just so that you know that you can access it during this conversation. Also, we can send it out to you, put you on our mailing list, and we also send magazines to parishes across the country for free. boxes. So it's our service to the church. I want to go back to you, Father Michael, because you also talked about the importance of parishes now being adaptable, and being adaptive. And in a piece in the magazine that you wrote, you said a parish needs to be God's bench. And you particularly reference St. Leonard's in the North End in Boston. And so I'm curious, because you served there and you saw what was happening, and then know that that church has been there forever. And yet, decades and decades, it's been able to adapt and change and bring people in and build community and make people feel like they're part of that church, even if they visit it once. So what's the secret?
In the case of St. Leonard's, I was always so taken by the neighborhood feel of the North End and how similar it was to some of the neighborhoods in Cleveland where I grew up. And any of you who ever spent time in the North End, or probably any ethnic neighborhood, you know that there are a lot of old people that sit outside on the sidewalk and strike up conversations with passersby. Sometimes this is Boston, not very welcoming conversations, but there you go, right? And how what a lifeblood of the neighborhood that community is. These people who all grew up around each other, have known each other since they were kids, and they're just kind of sitting outside on any nice day, and paying attention to each other, paying attention to the neighborhood, and paying attention to newcomers. Like I said, one of the things that the elderly people in the North End especially love to do is give recommendations for restaurants. And how similar that is to the ministry the Franciscans at St. Leonard's imagined that they were doing. That the parish was kind of like God's bench. In the midst of all these other, elderly people mostly sitting on their front stoops, you also have God sitting at St. Leonard's and kind of meeting passersby, paying attention to each other, paying attention to the people in the neighborhood. And imagining their ministry like that, especially the pastor, imagining his ministry like that, how that opened horizons for him when he realized that the traditional parish ministry that had gone on there for nearly a century was kind of sputtering to an end, but that there was this new hunger and this new need. And I give him credit. It was the fact that he himself was an immigrant. He was an immigrant from Italy, and he had lived all over the world as a Franciscan, and I think that opened his mind to just unique ministerial solutions. And boy, he blossomed in the North End. I think he's happy that the job is over. He recently retired, and now he's living in Toronto in a Franciscan house, because I think the job was very challenging for him. He was there over 10 years, but he's left the place in such better condition than he found it, mostly because he was just able to pay attention to his surroundings and imagine something new. I don't know if that gets at your question, but
I think one of the themes that will run through our conversation today is the importance of welcome. Mm-hmm. That parishes need to do welcome and community building well. And in the case of St. Leonard's, I mean, they were even raising a lot of money from people that maybe just came and experienced the parish once, or and it became part of their heart, part of their faith, part of the way that they practiced their Catholicism, and they wanted to remember that.
Like whenever I'm dealing with Franciscans and money, there's a lot of misdirection. I say this as a Jesuit. So anywhere from 15 to 30% of the $2.7 million necessary to restore the church was raised from, and I said 15 to 30, was raised from passersby, from one-time visitors who were impressed with the church being open at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night and a priest being available for conversation, and offered something back. And so I don't know how much it was, but it was a big chunk of change. Most of, and that would represent most of what it cost to restore the pipe organ and the organ loft, which in a church like that was not not an inconsiderable sum. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was an unexpected ministry and an unexpected response.
Absolutely. And the Holy Spirit working in all that.
I won't deny we have an advantage on that we're on the Freedom Trail. The Freedom
Right.
Trail runs right outside of our church, and so on any given day, there are hundreds, sometimes even thousands of tourists that walk by the church. So we
For those of us that
advantage.
are,
None of my friends in Cleveland would have that advantage if they were trying to restore
right,
it.
right. No, that's exactly right. And for anyone that comes to Boston next time, if you make your way to the North End, please just check out St. Leonard's, because it is such a really special place. I want to move the conversation now to a parish for the future. We're gonna visit some trends in a few minutes, but a parish for the future, because that's what we're all thinking about, right? What does a healthy parish for the future look like? And there's an article in the magazine. It's written by Father John Bauer, and he actually talks about, well, he reflects on he's the pastor at the Basilica of St. Mary's in Minneapolis, and they celebrated their 150th anniversary, and he reflects on what parishes need to do for the future. And he says parishes need to be a place of welcome and acceptance. Parishes need to be places of caring and compassion. Parishes must be places of challenge and disappointment. Parishes need to be places where people's faith is informed and where their spirits are nurtured. Parishes must always be places of worship and prayer. And finally, parishes must always keep their eyes trained on the future. So those were his observations. I want to bring Bob and Jean into the conversation and kind of reflect on the parish for the future. And I can certainly go back and revisit what he said, just so that you remember. But I think one of the most important takeaways for me is the welcome and the acceptance, and being compassionate and being doors wide open, and always be places where they can have the Eucharist and meet Jesus, and always keep their eye on the finances and the money and the future. So, Bob, why don't we start with you? You've been at your parish for 40 years.
Great. Thank you, Karen. My childhood parish closed. I've been in my current parish for 40 years, and we're in the midst of a merger. But I've been active in Holy Family, doing some specific things where Jean is the faith formation director. So it's really been an easy transformation for me. I'm sad about my parish leaving, and I made a decision to move to Holy Family, but I really have my feet in both places still at the moment. But I wanted to comment on how an easy transition it was to Holy Family. A, because they were very welcoming, and B, I believe that they challenged their parishioners, and I had some ideas, and they welcomed my interest in doing some things in the parish, and I was supported by Jean and by the pastor, and that was a great feeling. And so those two things were noteworthy. And Holy Family also has I think, a very strong trend of welcoming people to share their faith in person or on the website. And I think it's I think it makes all people feel that it's a place where a lot of their needs were met spiritually. So that's been my experience recently. And so I'm in that category of 1/3 of Catholics that one of the articles mentioned that live close, that attend a church further away than where they live. But it's been a fairly easy transition thanks to Jean and other people in Holy Family.
So was your decision to kind of move to Holy Family based on something that your parish wasn't doing, or it wasn't, feeding you or continuing to feed you? Or did it have something to do with a merger or a change, or like what made you make that decision after 40 years?
Well, two things. I was already doing a number of things at Holy Family, RCIA, and a small men's group in particular. But my parish at the time, there were many unknowns about the merger, which is involving three churches and the sale of three parishes, and the building of a mega church, and uncertainty about how it all would be staffed. So I decided to go someplace that's really not very far away that I was already established in. And it's been an adjustment, but I think it was the right decision for me.
Jean, so we welcome your thoughts and wisdom. I've heard so many things about Holy Family and just all that just how vibrant the parish is. And then you go on the website, right? And it just comes alive. By the way, if any of you are thinking about redoing your website, go to holyfamilyparish.org. Is that right? Is that the
Holy Family Duxbury, DUX.
Sorry, holyfamilyduxbury.org. It's an example of a beautiful website, and it's so easy to navigate. And at the same time, it brings you in, and right away you're thinking, this parish has something. So how long have you been at Holy Family?
So since 2014. So about 7 years. Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of changes in those 7 years. And I know that you've kind of just spearheaded their faith formation program, both from the young kids to the adults. So I'm curious, in your time, as we listen to this father talk about Parish for the Future, like what are you seeing in faith formation for the future? What's working in your parish, and what changes have you seen? Like, what have you moved away from? I'm curious.
Well, in some ways, we've sort of shifted our focus to be more on the idea that people won't engage in catechesis until they're evangelized, right? Until they have some sort of encounter. Like, I was struck by that article that Father Mike referenced about at St. Leonard's about the fact the pastor was hanging out in the church just to visit people that came in. That's not something that's commonly like part of your job description. So we've really tried hard to create a culture of welcome and to create some out of the box sorts of ways of doing what we do so that we can interact with people. Starting back with, we've transitioned from sort of age-based, what I grew up with, right? I went to Catholic school, and age-based catechesis at the in CCD and that sort of thing, to more of a family model, and have parents and children attending together and trying to bring community. We built things around meals and around the opportunity for people to come together in community, so that we had less contact with them, but tried to make that contact more impactful because people's schedules are so busy and so forth. So trying to draw in kind of young families. We also sort of paired it with outreach efforts. We did a huge Ash Wednesday event and a couple of like an all-day event where the church was open from like 5 a.m. till 9 p.m. so that people could come and go, and had literally thousands the second year, 2,000 people come through the doors on Ash Wednesday, and then try to link them to come back. You know, we have this event and we have that event, and now COVID's kind of flipped us again. So now it's like, how do we have a welcoming face at the door every day when the door isn't always open every day, right? Because faith formation is kind of shifting again. So we're trying to come up with new and creative ways to connect with people again in smaller scale events, and switching to a new kind of format.
How is that going, and how has that affected mass attendance there, knowing it was a vibrant and is a vibrant parish? And then also, how is the shift to remote learning for catechesis?
Well, our mass attendance at the moment is about 25 to 30% of what it was pre-pandemic. So that's our weekly attendance tracking. I don't know how that is compared to other trends or other parishes. But what we've tried to do now is, and actually I see one or two on this Zoom, that we try to have, like a welcoming presence when people arrive at church. There's a seating ambassador there to bring you to your place. We've tried to we started doing video messages online that we email out to our parishioners, and then tried to offer things online for families that we can't gather for a meal and for, a fun faith evening. We've started to do it virtually, but we have them come and pick up a bag of supplies before they do the catechesis, before they do the family faith formation event. And that gives us an opportunity to say hi and how's life going, and pass them their bag and interact with them and maybe get a sense of what's going on in their life. And then each week we kind of send out an outreach that kind of prompts a response, so that hopefully people will either comment on the side of an email blast, and we try and get conversation going there. We use our social media sites to try to welcome people and bring them back. And we've significantly upgraded our technology, live stream technology, to allow people to be able to watch Mass from home that aren't with us on Sunday mornings.
I give so many parishes so much credit. Once the pandemic hit, and I kind of referenced back our supplement, and who would have ever thought that in a week's time we'd be doing, drive-through reconciliation and adoration, and we'd be doing masses in the parking lot like a drive-in movie, and we'd be praying together, but yet apart. And it really did show how creative parishes can be, and they've proven it. And now we just have to continue with the creativity that the Holy Spirit gives us, so that we can keep thinking out of the box and keep creating and reinventing. And I think that's really what you're doing, Jean. And it can drive you crazy at times, because you're always thinking, how do I get out of this challenge, or how do I figure this out, And especially in a time when, like you said, everyone's so busy. We're not competing with soccer games. Yeah, we still are, but we're competing with, all the challenges of the pandemic right now, and how that changes parish life. And yet still, there are families that still feel like it's home. And one big thing is, we all know here, we've got to get the young families back to the parishes, because you get the young families in the pews eventually, and then they think, maybe I want to go to Catholic school. And then they go to Catholic school, and maybe I want to continue to learn more about my faith, and so on and so on. So yeah, there's lots going on, which is a good transition to my next point, which is trends. And I want to bring the three of you into this conversation. Okay, so let's look at some trends that are out there. Declining vocations. There's growth in the U.S. Catholic population, and Hispanics account for 71% of this growth. Declining participation in sacraments. Closing or merging of parishes. We have financial issues. Weekly Mass attendance. We need to grow more multicultural parishes, and at the same time learn how to minister to them. And then we have COVID. And I'm asking a big question here. So doesn't this call for a greater role for the laity? And a lot of us here, we've stepped up. You've all volunteered at your parishes, taught CCD, maybe raised your kids, but it does beg the question, does the laity need to step up more? And the time is right, and what can we do? And what have you seen done? You're doers. I mean, Bob, you're a doer. Jean, you're a doer. Father Michael, you're a big doer.
I think, Karen, that issue that you just identified really is a two-sided issue. It takes the members of the laity to step up, a willingness to either volunteer or create something new. But it also takes a willingness on the part of the pastor and other staff members of a parish to be open to that and to consider that. And I've appreciated that I've been allowed to do some interesting things in both of my parishes. And I think that takes an understanding that, what is done has to be good and sound and in keeping with the teachings of the church. And you have to build a relationship with the pastor, but it is a two-way street. And yeah, I think there's only going to have to be more of that happening as we go forward.
I think that's true.
I think too, I was going to say, I think too, for me at least, I came out of BC with my master's in 2001 and went to work for a parish as a pastoral associate in the city. And I think that in the years that have transitioned since then, there's a larger openness on the part of the parishioners to see lay people in roles of leadership in the church. My experience in transitioning to Holy Family, granted, I was older, I had children of my own, I had, a history of professional experiences, but it was just an easier transition. Like, the world is ready for that perspective, and we've tried at Holy Family to really capitalize on that with our young families, in terms of saying, we're parents too. We have young families too. We understand that you have a soccer schedule and this, but here's what we're asking from you. Can you give us this minute? And then our goal is just to bring you a few steps further on the journey. We're just trying to give you an experience and move you along in this faith journey. And there's something about just an invitation that's not a list of requirements or a list of things that someone has to do, but rather an invitation that if you're looking for something from your faith community, what can we partner with you? And I think people respond wonderfully, to the laity in those roles. I think the challenge from the other side is that people are so busy that building up teams of volunteers is a challenge for us anyway.
Yeah, I think for everyone.
Share.
Yeah.
Just to share our ministry is difficult.
Yeah. And also, it is a challenge when the pastor feels like everything is on him, and for the pastor to maybe be open to people helping and kind of taking charge. And that really depends upon the pastor. But I think I think a lot has changed in a beautiful way. Father Michael, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I would strongly agree with both what Jean and Robert said. I think some of it's also going to have to happen at the diocesan level. I think one of the structural realities right now is that, from the perspective of, at least in Boston, archdiocesan administration, the pastor is the one who's responsible for everything that happens in the parish. And the pastor hires and delegates. That's not reality, though. I mean, the reality is that there's a team that help develop and promote, or at least ideally help develop and promote what goes on in the parish. And even in the places where the pastor does try to be king, it's like catastrophic. So, or it can be. I think the awareness needs to be at the archdiocesan level, that there is a team in each parish, and that the diocese has a responsibility to cultivate those teams and support them in their ministry, and that parishes rise or fall based on everybody who's working there, and that usually means a large group of lay people and maybe one or two ordained people, priests and deacons. I have a feeling that there are other parts of the country and certain other countries where that is much more entrenched in Catholic culture. I think in the United States, for so long, we were blessed with an abundance of priests that we're still kind of living through the afterglow of that reality. And mentally, we haven't transitioned to a different way of understanding administration, both at the diocesan and parish level. I think those days are coming, though. And it's not just because of a decline in the number of ordained vocations. I think it's because the laity have reclaimed their place and will continue to expand on that, and ought to. I think that's good. I would also, if you don't mind me going on a little bit, what Jean said was very thought provoking to me. I know, just because I'm an amateur historian. My undergraduate degree was in history, and I'm fascinated by documents and texts. So I enjoyed going through some of the records at St. Leonard's, and to see how much was done in the 50s and 60s by two groups that largely don't exist anymore. And that is homemakers who did not work a salary job outside the home, but had ample time to come to the parish and show up and do whatever was necessary, and also the sisters. So, I mean, some of the most brilliant Catholic women volunteered their lives to work for free. I don't know that we understand the gift that we had in that, and what we owe them. Those two groups That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, it's a different reality. Understanding parish volunteerism in this new context, I think, is also something that we're taking time to relearn. It's the reality. We have to pay people now to do things that 50, 70 years ago they were lining up to do for free, and it's just a different reality. We haven't grown into it yet. I think we will, and the talent is there and the willingness is there, and I think in many cases the resources can be there, and it's just a matter of learning to be this new reality.
Yeah. I also think too that young people and young families are finding a way to practice their faith, but not necessarily build a bridge or a life to the parish, and that continues to be just a huge challenge. Father Joe, he wrote, "Some predict the demise of parish life. I think the particular forms of parish life, the particular forms of parish life have and will die, but not the parish itself. Parishes have had many variations in their structure, their governance, and even particular ministries. The parish of 1950 is not the parish of 2020, and the parish of today is not the parish of 2050. Structures, governance, ministries change and evolve as people's and particular needs change and evolve. But what remains unchanging is in the center of all parish life, Jesus, who calls us into community." And kind of going back to Jesus and the Eucharist and the power of the Holy Spirit on a mission to continue his ministry in the world. So I always love to fall back on the Holy Spirit, because we have lots of challenges. And I do think working together, building community, using technology to the best of your ability, being welcoming, being open to ideas. Like Bob Fanning walks in and says, "I want to start this program," and having the pastor or whomever say, "Great, do you want to do it?" And lead with yes, as opposed to leading with no. I also think that we have to talk about the challenges of effective ministry in multicultural parishes, which is definitely the case in the South and the West, where it's just booming. These parishes are just booming. And there's a great piece in the magazine called "Untying Wet Knots," and it's by a priest, Father Bill Barman, and he talks about being moved to a parish in California. And it was not only a multicultural challenge, but it was an older parish, and they had been doing business one way for a really long time. And it wasn't necessarily the right way, and it wasn't welcoming at all. And then the next thing you know, they have all these donations from white donors that decide that they don't want the small church anymore. They want the big church. And now all the Hispanics and people from all different races are feeling marginalized, because now they're building this big church, and they don't feel welcome. So what do? They picket and they protest, and they do it for 10 years. And this priest walks in, stage left, to try to manage all that. And it's a remarkable article, because it talks to how open he was to seeing what was really happening, and to realizing that people were feeling marginalized, and that they weren't welcome in their own church. And they were doing 10 English masses a weekend, and 1 Vietnamese and 1 Spanish. And he had the grace to say, "No, we can't do that." All the signs that were on the parish doors, they were all written in English, and everything was no loitering, no coming in, no doing this, no doing that, and how it took him a while to turn that parish into a welcoming place, like years and years, but he did it. And it's a great read. It's called "Untying Wet Knots." And I think we can all appreciate when we have a pair of sneakers and there's a knot in the lacings of the sneakers. That's his analogy. And you can't untie them, and it's so hard. And so, again, I just can't appreciate that article more, because I think it's really real. I want to move to some best practices. If you're in the magazine and you're taking a look at the article on best practices, I'm curious to, again, when we open it up to the audience, to see what some of your ideas are for best practices in liturgy, in preaching, in music, in social justice and engagement, faith formation. But I'm going to, again, back to our panelists, looking at your experience and your time, can you bring to light some best practices that have worked at the parish level? Whether it be, like I said, in liturgy, preaching, music, social justice programs, teenage engagement, regular engagement, faith formation. I don't know.
One of the things at Holy Family that I think is really remarkable is that there is this continuous effort to evaluate how the parish is doing. And it's a perpetual tweaking, if you will. And I think that's a good practice and openness to what's working, what do we need to change. So I think that's just a good quality. I also wanted to comment on something that Jean may not like this, but in this area down here on the South Shore where I am and Jean is, there is a priest that has established a teen mass that has been incredibly positive and powerful, and it's drawn a lot of young people from many, many parishes and has really kept kids in the church through high school and into college. And it's a little probably disruptive to other parishes because families wind up going with the kids. But I think you'd agree, Jean, it's probably had a pretty powerful impact for that age group in particular. So that's been a best practice that's really been quite remarkable that I think is noteworthy.
Bob, is that Teen Life?
Life Teen.
Life Teen, excuse me. Yeah.
Life Teen, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable thing, yeah.
I know that a lot of high school students that do experience that program, I've met a lot of them here at BC, and they continue to practice their faith, so they're doing something extraordinary, which this is a good transition into talking about some programs, some new programs, and some things that are out there that are working. I do want to draw your attention to a new partnership program with the School of Theology and Ministry. They just started to offer this. It's the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry is excited to announce a 50% scholarship for all applicants in our MA in Theology and Ministry programs working full-time in parish ministry across the United States. So I think that's a great gift that we can give parish ministers. I also want to talk about a couple of programs that I know are working. I mentioned one at the beginning of this program. It's called Faith Feeds. And again, it's a small group conversation and about a number of different topics. You download a guide, it's so turnkey, and there's a facilitator. Anyone can be a facilitator, and you just have this great conversation over a cup of coffee or lunch or dinner. It also works virtually. So all the information about Faith Feeds, I know, Jean, you rolled it out at your parish. I know Bob was actually one of the inspirations for Faith Feeds because we were piloting it. And so I know that works. Also, too, we have a fairly new program that we started in the pandemic for parishes. It's called, and for young families, it's called Breakfast with God. You can find it on our website, bc.edu/C21. And young families meet on Zoom every Sunday morning at 9:00. We have a preschool teacher, Miss Ann Crane from St. Columbkills, our partnership school over in Brighton, Massachusetts. And we have Father Tran, who's a Jesuit here at Boston College. And they put together kind of like a really fun and engaging Mr. Rogers kind of a 30 minutes for kids and for young families. And it's really scaffolding before parents either go to virtual mass and the kids kind of tune out, or they actually go to mass. But it's Breakfast with God. It is fantastic. It is open to everyone and anyone. All you have to do is go on the website and register. It's completely free. So those are a couple of resources. Jean, when you're looking at what you're doing at Holy Name, if you had to recommend one program that either has surprised you or it's just kind of taken off, could you name one? Not to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, it depends on what age group you're speaking about. And you know what I mean? In general, we do use faith feeds. We use some pre-packaged programs like Alpha for questioners, for seekers. We use we've done some Bible studies through Ascension Press, those kind of things. But by and large, we mostly create our own resources and programs specifically targeted at the populations that we're looking for. So, which takes a lot more time and a lot more effort, but we've often surveyed people on the way in and the way out of programs and asked what they want and tried to sort of meet those needs. And when we can't, send them out. So, we send out resources once or twice a week to our parishes. So if we can't, we don't want to recreate the wheel. So we send them to Breakfast with God because we don't have something like that. So we've advertised that in our email blast, that sort of thing. But so as far as with children or with faith formation with families, we've mostly created our own resources and borrowed from packaged programs.
Which isn't easy to do, but yet obviously effective. Before we published this magazine, we sent out a survey to maybe all of you and to 5,000 people. And we basically said, what's working in your parish and what do you love most about your parish? And I'm just going to read a couple of things that people said. One said that our parish offers 3 different types of Sunday liturgy: a more solemn liturgy with more traditional music on Saturday evenings, a contemporary mass on Sunday mornings, and a praise and worship mass on Sunday evenings. Someone else mentioned, speaking of programming, Jean, have you ever heard of the program? It's called GIFT, G-I-F-T, Generations in Faith Together. It's a program for people of all ages to be learning and sharing and eating together. Teenagers eat with other people's grandmothers. Young mothers get support from old moms. Fathers learn with children and older men that are welcomed into their experience and their faith journey. And the program is run by a lay team. So it's GIF. You could look it up, GIF, G-I-F-T. Someone else mentioned, obviously, the importance of family mass. Also, for the LGBTQ community, saying that they really feel that that the Catholic Church has a lot of beautiful ministries, but you have to seek them out. And she had mentioned that she attends regular Sunday Mass with the Archdiocese of Chicago's Gay and Lesbian Outreach Ministry, and then they kind of grow community that way. Marriage preparation. My parish has a monthly ministry for newly married couples. Newlyweds come and they meet with older couples in the parish who offer mentorship in all aspects of married life. Youth ministry, parish linking. I thought this was kind of interesting. We've been linked with a parish in a Catholic elementary school in El Salvador for the last 15 years, and how effective that's been. And then also someone mentioned their pastor, Father Greg. This is St. Ignatius out in California, where he makes it a point to know every person's name. And he was one of the priests too that started to, during the pandemic, to have the parishioners take pictures of themselves, and then he went around and taped them to all of the pews. So that was a beautiful thing. But there are lots of ideas out there, and I think we're in this moment where we need ideas and we need action, and we need people that are excited about working in the parish and about doing God's work there and inviting people. And I think, and again, I hope I'm not making a generalization by saying that I think sometimes we struggle with evangelizing our own faith to others for fear of offending other people, and then also not realizing the power of invitation. And we try to say that to the students here at BC. If you're going to Mass, invite a friend, So has anyone ever been invited to Mass by a stranger? Paula? Nice. Okay, one. I see one. So the power of that invite. I want to open it up now to the audience for them to ask questions, for them to offer ideas of what's working, and share maybe some of your challenges and your wisdom, having been connected to your parish basically for your lifetime. So I kind of open that up.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is John Main. I'm in Miami, Florida.
Hi, John.
I wonder if any of you might offer suggestions about adult faith formation, and I'm not talking about Bible study or RCIA or even programs on evangelization, but a preparation for the individual Catholic faithful to deal with their day-to-day activities outside of the parish or the diocese or any immediate Catholic context. That's where most of them are at most days. I myself have recently retired, so I'm a little bit more secluded these days, but I've been dealing with this for over 20 years, giving particular attention to Second Vatican's decree on the apostolate of the laity, and I've searched high and low for programs comparable to those for lay ministry, and I don't see any. Father Sweeney in California has recently started one that is the closest. As best that I know, its curriculum is very similar to most of the programs for lay ministry. And so it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for practical, nitty-gritty preparation and support of the laity for their day-to-day activities. A number of years ago, I've been 2 times on the pastoral council in the parish. The consistency of that, of course, is subject to whoever the pastor is right now. It's gone up and down, it's disappeared, it's come back, and you start all over again, but that's a side subject. Side subject.
Program, John.
I'm almost finished. A few years ago, when I was on the pastoral council, I was promoting the idea that we're not here to create ministry. We're here to support them in their day-to-day activity. We do ministry to support that program, but I don't see any faith formation. I mean, beyond, of course, RCIA, but that's a different thing. And Bible study, that's a different thing. I'm talking about this day-to-day stuff. Do you know anything? Any program, any particular thing that you could recommend? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I can mention one program that was run by a priest who's been dead for a number of years, and so it's not continued, but it was run by a Paulist by the name of Bob Quinn, who would gather people together for breakfast in his apartment, and according to their professional involvement. So he would gather lawyers together, or businessmen together, or teachers together, or whatever, where they could come and talk unstructured, unprogrammed about the issues of faith as related to their everyday work. He used to do that on a regular basis, and unfortunately, he's been dead for a number of years, and I don't think anybody ever picked it up again. But that was a way to do it.
Karen, I have 2 thoughts, Karen. John, I would encourage you to develop your own and work with the people in your parish and maybe put something together. Number 1. Number 2, I'm part of a small men's group in our parish. It's a community of practice, I think the article spoke about. And we meet on Saturday mornings at 7 o'clock. In fact, a couple of the guys are on the Zoom right now. And we just talk about our faith and the readings for Sunday, and it's been a very enriching experience.
Father Simon mentioned earlier structure. I just keep wondering why there's so much attention and money over the years been put into lay ministry programs and not to this other aspect of what the Second Vatican Council said. It said the laity is primarily secular, not in the church. Why do we put all the money into lay ministry?
Mm.
That's my question, I suppose, in a larger sense.
I don't know, to be honest. If I could explain some of the spending decisions of the Roman Catholic Church over the last 70 years, I'd probably be able to become a major consultant. I think the reason, so if I had to guess, this is pure guesswork, the increase in those lay ministry programs came at the same time that there was a rapid decrease in the number of religious sisters. And again, religious sisters and stay-at-home moms used to do everything in the parish, and so we've developed lay ecclesial ministry programs in part to help the laity achieve their place in the church, but also in part to plug the hole that was left from the loss of all of this like free and exceptionally talented labor. So that's my guess. The other part too is I think it's just a blind spot. The people who make decisions about these things are people who also have to make decisions about running parishes, running schools, running dioceses, and they are going to invest in things that they know. So they're going to invest in the types of ministry that they know the best, which, again, probably parish ministry, probably school-based ministry. Whereas the development of the faith of Catholics who spend 98% of their Catholic life outside of an ecclesial context, yeah, you're absolutely correct. We're only at 0.0 on that one. There's a lot of work to do.
One other program that you might look at, John, is That Man Is You out of Houston, Texas. If you Google that, you can find them. And some people like it, some people don't, but it's worth taking a look at.
Would you repeat that name again?
That Man Is You.
Okay, thank you.
I put it in the chat, you, Patrick. You. Angela, did you have?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So my question was around the qualifications, the kinds of qualifications that parishes look for in people who really want to be more involved in the parish. My experience is that, just having a lot of enthusiasm and interest and desire doesn't cut it, because there seems to be some things that they're looking for. I guess, the business of caring for souls is a very important one. So it's not surprising that they want to vet the people and make sure that they have the qualifications. So I was wondering about that. What kind of people are we talking about when we're looking to attract people who will serve in the church in various ministries?
Jean, can you?
I mean, I can only speak from my experience here, and Bob referenced earlier is that I have a pastor who's very open to lay empowerment. So we don't necessarily, and sometimes people are frustrated because sometimes people will come with an idea and it's just not one that we can support at the current moment, but because we can only focus on so many priorities at a time. But for us, a person who's willing to work with a member of the staff and sort of be mentored to do things and to work with somebody, like if it was for teenagers, we'd have them work with our youth minister, or if it was for adults, we'd have them work, or families, a lot of times they'd work with me, those kind of things. So we wouldn't require a certain qualification in a volunteer. It would be more that they would be willing to work with someone so that we could identify what their gifts and talents were and put them in the right type of ministerial placement, and not in one that exceeded their span of abilities. But I can only speak from the context from which I come, which is the parish. That's how we would approach it here at Holy Family.
Angela, has that been a challenge for you, getting involved? Please tell me no.
Then I have nothing to say. No, so I think I've been given this feedback a couple of times that that I should maybe have more theology background. So so that's part of the reason why I am now a student at BC, because I just want to make sure that I am prepared. I had a long conversation with my mother about humility. So, so I've been curious, and it just sounds like we have a really good group of people right now who care about the future of the church and what it's going to look like. So I just wanted to, get some ideas of what people think.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's so important. Like, all are welcome.
I wish we weren't so far south of BC. We're about 45 minutes from you, but otherwise we'd welcome you right over here.
Yeah. Other questions, thoughts, reactions?
I think one other issue that's worth talking a little bit about, that I think Jean runs into quite a bit, is people will say, you should do ABC. And she doesn't quite say it strongly enough, but I think the answer really has to be, how would you like to do that?
Yeah, that's what Bob was saying too, kind of turning it around,
Right.
I think there's a moment here in the church. We refer back to a little bit, and again, Father Mike's description from the beginning of our conversation today of what his parish experience in Ohio looks like was very similar, with the exception of maybe the credit union. My experience in Massachusetts, I grew up in Quincy, just south of the city, and I went to Catholic school and all those kind of things. But we did a lot. We didn't talk about, my family was very faithful, but we did a lot and checked a lot of boxes. Like, we did what we were supposed to do at Catholic school, and we didn't question, we kind of said yes, and we learned. I think one of the great signs of hope in the church is that people now ask a lot of questions, and they're challenged by what the church is offering, and they don't just blindly agree. And there may be less people in the pew in front of us, but the ones in the pew are striving to figure something out. Even the young families that we survey often say, like, we know we don't go to church enough, and we know we're not involved enough in the parish, but we want this for our children. And they report a real struggle and so those that do grow into the church ministry do so through a process, not just an obligation. Does that make sense? So what Ken refers to, I think, is that sometimes the other side of that coin is that people have strong opinions about what the parish should do, but don't want to be the ones that do it. Not everyone's like Angela. So I think it's it's hope at the same time as it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned hope, because that's where I kind of wanted to end, and to ask Father Michael and Bob what their hope is for the future of parish life.
Go ahead, Father. You have the floor.
What are friends for, Bob?
Well, I hope it's more of what I think I'm seeing in a lot of parishes now, where we're better at the unexpected parishioner. I guess that's the best way to put it. That there's, I loved the solidity of parishes where there were 3-4 generations of parishioners. And those still exist. My sisters both worship in parishes like that in Cleveland. But I've been actually having fun at St. Leonard's and St. Cecilia's, where on any given Sunday you have people who maybe have never darkened the door of a church in their lives, and they're there for the first time, right next to somebody whose grandfather donated the stained glass windows. And I have a feeling that's going to be the trend for a while. And I think that's wonderful. I like that mix of people.
And you know what, too, Father Michael, I want to thank you, because the last article in the magazine is leaving the church doors open. It's a great piece and a great message. There's hope there when we open our minds, when we open our hearts, when we open our doors, and we welcome people. Bob, final thoughts.
I'm very optimistic about the future. I think the church experience will probably be smaller after COVID, and that's unfortunate. But I think there are a lot of exciting things going on, and I think we all have to chip in there and do it together. Matthew Kelly makes an interesting statement. He says that the church can't do everything, but it doesn't mean that the church should do nothing. So there's a lot of room out there for involvement and to, spread the message of Jesus.
And to your point, Jean, this is a special moment in time, and we have to figure out when we get beyond this pandemic, and we will, how we come together and invite people back. I've heard some priests mention to me that they've seen people at masses, especially the outdoor masses, that they've never seen before. So I think the pandemic has been a grace in that regard. People are connecting with their faith and they're reflecting, and they have the time to do that. And now we need to figure out a way to bring them back, especially the young families. We need them. They're our future, these kids. Well, we thank you for your time and for your love for the church and for your energy and your ministry, and for being interested in this conversation. We've recorded it. We'll put it up as a video and also as a podcast. Please know that we are here to serve you in any way possible. All you have to do is send us an email, church21@bc.edu. If you want magazines, if you want us to send magazines to your friends for Christmas, if you have a question about something, you want an actual copy of the supplement, we can send those out. Again, church21@bc.edu. If you have an idea for a program, or if you're struggling and need to connect with someone, let us know. We're all friends here. And again, I invite you to join our Faith Feeds group on every Friday at 1 o'clock. You can register online at our website, and we'd love to have you. And thanks again. Please know that we are going to continue to use this magazine, thanks to Father Michael and Father Joe, for the remainder of the semester and beyond. And we're going to use it as a touchstone for more conversations like this. The next conversation will be with a panel of priests, both young and old, and experienced, and not so experienced. So that'll be interesting, to say the least. But Father Michael, thank you for your gifts. Jean, thank you for your service, 24 years and counting. Bob, thank you for your inspiration and all that you do, for the church and for education, and here at as a participant in the C21 program. So thank you, and have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy. We're in this together.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more Catholic faith resources, follow us at bc.edu/C21 or via Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.